I was chatting to my friend Kieran yesterday. He popped round on spec just to see if I happened to be in, and I was. I said, "Oh, come on in, come and have a nice cup of tea, and we'll put the world to rights," as you do when your friends pop round. Very important to do that sort of thing. And there we were. And one of the things that came up, of course, was money and how the banks, and in particular NatWest on 9/11, interesting date that, something happened then, I can't quite remember what, but on the 9th of September this year, apparently, they are going to withdraw the amount of money that you can take from their cash machines or their counters, and I believe it's about £250 in cash. It also means that they're going to restrict how much money you can deposit into their bank in cash, which does seem a bit odd. So if you were, say, somebody who worked down the local market selling fish or vegetables and things like that, and you managed to get through that day, I don't know, a few £1,000s, you did really well, and you went to the bank and said, "Look, people have been paying me in cash all day, there's a couple of £1,000, I want to put it into my account," and they turn around and say, "Well, we'll take 250 of it today, but you'll have to bring the next bit in instalments." It just seems weird sort of logic. But of course, we know really what this is about. It's the banks and the government, it seems, in lockstep with them, wanting to come about with a cashless society so that we become more and more dependent on digital payments. Anyway, I was waxing lyrical with Kieran and he just said, "Well, you know, the answer to this is quite simple." I said, "Oh, what is it?" He said, "Just stop online digital payments." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean by that then?" He said, "Well, of course, if you stop online digital payments, people would have to go again locally and buy stuff. Now, they could use their banker's card, but if you were promoting cash as a private transaction, nobody need know what it is. Of course, that's what the beauty of cash is. And also, though, if you were unable now to keep buying stuff from some of these very large online retailers, you'd actually be encouraging small independent businesses to supply the local area with the things that you want. So if, for example, you wanted, I don't know, books, I know there used to be bookshops and second-hand bookshops, and one particular company made its advances online by being the biggest bookseller before it started to sell everything else, you may remember. But there would be all sorts of other things that you would encourage small businesses to do again, all those sort of things that we used to do. From where I am, there used to be an ironmonger, and you could go into this ironmonger and buy just one screw or one nut, and you would pay in pence for those luxury items, so you could go and perhaps buy a new bath plug, one bath plug. You didn't have to buy a packet of 6 of them, you could just buy one, and they were very helpful, independent, family-run business. No longer here because they couldn't compete with the online global network. Well, if you again said, "Well, actually, I just want to deal with local firms, with real people, independent companies, and keep all your money in the local environment," I think that would be brilliant. Of course, the problem is that we are where we are, and it seems that most people like convenience. They don't really think further than what that convenience means, and they haven't perhaps recognised that their local high street has become homogenised with very big brands, and small independent companies are going out of the window, which is a shame because those very same people who like that convenience may well have wanted to set up their own business and be independent themselves, only they've actually enabled a system where it becomes too expensive to do such a thing. So it does seem unlikely at this stage that we would ever get back to that situation. So my friend Kieran said, well, there is of course another way in which you could keep all your transactions private, especially with the advent of the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, being threatened, or this whole move to keep us in a digital world. And I said to him, what's that then? He said, well, I'm buying gold. And I immediately thought of great lumps of gold, you know, big bars of gold. I thought, well, what can you do with that? How would you buy, say, a pint of milk if you've got a massive, great lump of gold? He said, Richard, you obviously haven't been buying any gold recently. And I said, no, to be honest with you, I haven't. I'm always be worried that A, it isn't gold, that it might be something like lead, painted gold. How would I know? And also, where would I store it? What would happen if somebody stole it? And he said, well, these days gold is extremely expensive and it's very, very tiny. So perhaps 1 gram of gold is a tiny, tiny thing and is about £50, something like that. And I said to him, well, that makes even less sense, doesn't it? Because if you've got a tiny, tiny amount of gold that's, you know, like 1 gram you can barely see, and you want to go to your local newsagent shop and buy a pint of milk and it's worth 50 quid, how can they give you change? And he said, I've got an idea for that too. I thought, you're a bit of a brain box, you are. What's your idea? And he said, well, quite simply, what you do is if you buy gold, you transfer your digital money into a real asset, a valuable metal like gold. You then go to these various little independent shops and you say, here's my gram of gold worth 50 quid, or several grams of gold worth more values of that. And I'm going to invest in your business. I'm going to ask for credit. So in other words, you put £50 on the counter and say, there it is. I appreciate you can't give me change. But what I will do is over the next few weeks is continue to come back to your shop and buy things until I have spent £50. And then I'll give you another gram of gold, and so on and so forth. And what they end up giving you is a receipt, which is then worth what's left. So let's say you put £50 worth of gold on the counter, you buy a bit of milk, let's say that's worth £1, you come away with a receipt now that's worth 49 quid. So you then go back later on and buy a loaf of bread, some eggs, whatever else it is that you want. Now, if more and more businesses thought, actually, this is great because this is now a private transaction between you and the shop, or me and my customers. Nobody else need to get involved with it. Nobody need to keep a track of how much you're spending and who's spending and where it is. It's a private thing. I thought, this is genius. We don't need a government to know everything about us, or even to have the ability to know everything about us. This is about getting back to investing in our communities, encouraging small independent family-run businesses to be independent family-run businesses without the big nose of government sticking it in and sniffing up all things and knowing everything about it. We don't need any of that. We just need to recreate what we used to have before the global economy came in and started to steal all our reasons for being alive. And one of those is privacy. We don't need cameras all over the place taking your biometrics. We don't need shops that means you've got to have a mobile phone and that you've got to be able to get in using a QR code, and as you go around taking things off the shelf, it's automatically deducting it from your bank balance, and that if anybody wanted to know how much you did take out of that shop, they could have a look at that. We don't want a situation where even cryptocurrency, and I did an interview with somebody fairly recently on his show, was telling me actually, although it does seem like Bitcoin is private, it is still traceable. You can work out from this number, which would identify you if you were clever enough to work it out, and people are clever enough to work that out, how much you'd spent over to this person and their encrypted number. And we know that people are, you know, these fraudsters are very clever. And isn't it a thing that most fraud these days is all online with digital payments? It's less fraud is going on with real money, real cash in real situations. And yet the banks, if you go to the bank and say, I'd like to have a few £1,000s out, please, in cash, will give you the nth degree on what are you going to do with that money? Maybe somebody's spamming that money. Maybe they will want you to spend it on their thing. It's actually, do you know what? It's my damn money. I don't want anything to do with it. So I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Why don't we invest? You could do the same with farms. You see a farm, you say, do you know what, I'm going to give you 50 quid, 100 quid, whatever. Give me a receipt and I will continue to buy from your farm. And that would incentivise farmers to buy the sort of things that people would want to buy in their locality. It would get people eating good quality food again, because it would be in the farmer's interest to provide good quality food, healthy, organic, and all those sort of things, rather than the nonsense that we're now buying from supermarkets, where the minerals and vitamins have been pretty much reduced and we have all sorts of weird and wacky chemicals shoved on our food in this highly processed fashion. It would, of course, bring back communities and reinvest in ourselves and our ability. What do you think? Be interested in your comments.